So, welcome, Elle. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure. We've been meaning to put this podcast for quite a while, haven't we? We've been quite a back and forth for a few months now,
Yeah,
haven't we?
yeah, exactly. I'm glad we're finally doing it.
No, perfect. And I think in our previous call we had a good discussion about what we'll talk about, and I think the one that we kind of hit on, and I'm really excited about it, is hosting recruitment events. So you've done a few of these, and you've also kind of worked with Camino to build communities. And for me, I think the event space and the community space is so huge, especially post COVID. So I think it would be really good for us to kind of like break down what that looked like, the journey that you went through, and hopefully we can get some value out of this. So how does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good.
Perfect. So let's talk about your first event at Camino. I know that you kind of said that you did some before in Signify, but you said those were a lot more sort of put together and you had all the consultant buy-in. And then when you kind of went for Camino, you was a little bit more on your own and you kind of had to run it all yourself, didn't you? A lot of it was on you. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I think the important thing to kind of note is that Camino Search, which is where I kind of focused my events efforts initially when I joined Camino Partners, they were a really kind of a new brand. So they were a new brand stepping into a new market. When I joined the business, that they literally kind of just launched the brand. So I think it's kind of important to note that at the time of me kind of working on events to Signify, the kind of the branding behind the events had already been established, and there'd already been that brand establishment kind of done, and they were kind of embedded in that community. So I think that's the important thing to note, is that we was coming into a new market as a new brand, and doing a completely new event series that we hadn't like tried or tested before, basically. So I think, like, initially, one important thing to note is as well that with events, it's not going to be a one size fits all. It's just because it works for one recruitment business, it doesn't mean it's going to work for another. And even, in that business, it's not going to work for every kind of audience that you have as well. So it's about, kind of figuring out what those pain points are for different clients or different candidates. I'm really working with that. So again, back to when I kind of joined Camino Search, the consultants on the Camino Search brand, they weren't, they were posting like maybe a job ad on LinkedIn, and they weren't really engaging with personal branding or anything like that. So I think it's about kind of building that brand establishment first, and then you can really go in with the events and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's great. So fresh slate coming into Camino Search. How did you know that there was the market fit for an event?
Yeah, so I think we knew that there wasn't really a space for specifically for finance professionals in tech, and there wasn't really any event series out there. There wasn't sort of groups or like webinars or anything like that at the time, and also especially specifically finance professionals leaving sort of practice and going into industry. So we could see there was a gap in the market for it, and it was a time when we were just coming out. We kind of just come out of COVID, and at that time, people were quite keen to really like get out there and meet people, having not done it for a period of time. So I think we could see that, and then it was just kind of working out the best way that we could possibly engage them, like that network, basically.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the appetite for live events is definitely growing, especially after COVID. People are desperate to get out and do things now, aren't they? Especially in the major cities. So let's talk about the first event at Camino Search. Do you want to give me the warts and all story of how that went and sort of Yeah, break it down for us.
Yeah, so I think so. The first event, I think, basically looking back, we was like ultimately just a bit too ambitious. So this is, like I say, a brand new market. This event series wasn't something that we had done before. And I think if we look at our kind of pre-event strategy, I think that's where, there's probably the biggest like lesson learned, for me anyway, because when drawing from previous experience, I was using a framework that I already knew, basically, which did work. I managed to get, I think, like over 300 people join a completely new meetup page within like 2 months. So that was great, and that was how we kind of, at Signify, that was how we kind of built our events community there, was on the meetup page, and we'd get people invited in that format. What we hadn't really kind of decided at Camino was whether this event was going to be invite only, or whether it was going to be open to anyone who signed up via a meetup page or via socials. And I think that's something that's really, really important to establish. First of all, how are you going to get people to the event? Who's going to be responsible for getting people to the event? Is it going to be marketing? Is it going to be partly marketing, partly the consultants? Is it going to just be consultants? Going to be invite only from people they know? So that was a bit, like, to be honest, it was a bit messy. Like, it was a bit unclear. It wasn't completely decided. And I think that's where you can kind of, with events, you have to know that, because that's going to really affect your timelines. That's going to really affect at what stage you have a set attendee list, and at what stage, because so with events, normally you will work to like a 60-40 ratio. If you have 100 people invited, you can probably expect around 40 people to attend. So, and to be fair, we kind of, we did have like a good group of people attend the event, but it was the kind of scrambling in the lead up to the event, that can end up taking up way too much time, basically, of everyone's time. And it's just not the most, it's not the nicest way to go into an event. So I think just establish, who's going to be responsible for the attendees attending. Are you going to have literally anyone who signs up online, if they can come and they can attend, or is it going to be more specifically invite only? And it might sound like well, it's obvious, anyone who signs up can attend. That gives you more chance of more people attending. But obviously, when it comes to kind of recruitment events, especially, you've got things to consider, like, are you going to have hiring managers and potential candidates in the room? And how's that going to work? Have you got a contract sort of in place to make sure that comes through you? Or are you going to actually be losing business because you're facilitating a space that actually you're being counterproductive to your recruitment service? So there's all of those sort of things to consider as well, which is why sometimes having kind of an open invite isn't always going to work.
Yeah, really like that. It's like that, making sure that you have a clear distinction. And I hadn't even thought about the whole sort of the putting in place contracts and that kind of making sure you don't lose business, because that is really such an important thing. An initial question where you were talking, like, what sort of tactics did you employ to get those 300 people to initially sign up?
Yeah, so that was just about sort of online socials, sharing content. We had actually we did a webinar prior to this event, and that got a lot of traction. That had quite a few attendees. So then we kind of used the content from the webinar, from our speaker, and shared that on our socials, and just to give people a bit of a bit of an insight, a bit of a taste into the kind of content that you could expect at our events. So that was kind of the main tactic, and the usual sort of email marketing to our database, explaining what we was doing, why we was doing it, and the kind of takeaways that they could get from the event.
Yeah, perfect. And I think I'm going to touch on when you just said like what you're doing, why you're doing it. So did you have kind of a strong like value added to the event theme in terms of bringing in a speaker, etc.?
Yeah, so our main kind of like why we were doing it is simply because we felt like there wasn't spaces like this for people that were considering a move from practice to industry. So it was a very specific, I know this is another thing that is very important, that you kind of decide first, especially with kind of stakeholders in the business, because I think sometimes you can get a little bit carried away with, we want to do this and we want to do that, and this would be amazing, and what about this, and it can be amazing, and there's often a lot of things that you want to cover, but for an event it does have to be really specific, and it needs to be to a very specific target audience, otherwise it's just going to be wishy-washy. So we really focused ours on people who had experience in practice, so they've done a finance, come from SEMA or ACA background in finance, and they were looking to make the transition to industry, and potentially considering tech as that industry. So that was our specific niche, and it was like, come to our event, and we've got I think we had four speakers who have kind of done this before. They've moved from practice to industry, and they've done that journey, and they've got their key takeaways that they can share with you. So that was our kind of topic, and that was our why. And that seemed to work well, because that's three people that have, they each have different talks, and they could share their experiences, and it was valuable.
Yeah, perfect. So if you moved, so you said that you initially had a very open sort of invitation, not even invitations, just anyone could sign up, and then I guess for future events you did more of a closed registration, is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, how did you handle that in terms of strategy and getting people to sign up to those, etc.?
Yeah, so I think if you're sort of, and this is what kind of another thing that it wasn't perfect after, in the events following, but I think when you're having a closed invitation, it does take a little bit of it takes the power away from the marketeer, essentially, because you can kind of do the social posts, but it needs to be targeted to a specific audience, and a lot of the time that is going to come from a consultant, and the consultant's going to be the one with those really personal connections, and the network to be able to do that. So that was about kind of how to get the consultants to take ownership, and I think that initially we kind of had the whole Camino Search brand, all of the consultants, it was all of their responsibility to invite people to the events. That doesn't really work very well. Recruiters are really busy, and that's not going to be a priority for them, basically. So I think if you have a really specific topic, and it's targeting a specific group of candidates, then you can get whoever looks after that desk. That can be, it can be their project, it can be their event. Make it about them, celebrate the wins when they happen, like how many people they got invited and things like that. And that format works really well. That's something that the Camino Partners brands have been doing like previously, and that works really well, to have one specific consultant take ownership of the event and marketing to support them.
Yeah, perfect. And we've come up with similar themes in terms of like championing the consultants in terms of personal branding, but also marketing projects, and decreasing that gap between the sales and the marketing team. So that's really interesting to hear a similar thing for event management.
Yeah.
So you lost a little bit of power making it a closed event, and then you started to bring the consultants in, you championed them a bit, and you started getting an event put together. What did the actual event look like? Were there any, so that we're going into the mid now. So if you've got the pre, mid and post strategy, I always think with an event, is there any learnings, successes, etc., that you had with the actual event that happened?
Yeah, so I think like definitely successes, like I say, this, there was a lot that we kind of learned, but there was a lot of successes as well. And I think actually the kind of mid strategy was really good. We maintained touch points with the people that had committed to come in really well. Like our ratio of people that committed to come in who actually came was really good. So we managed those touch points really well, because that's another important thing. If you kind of invite people to an event and you kind of you get them to say they're coming, you need to kind of, people are busy, you need to kind of make sure that they are reminded that the event's happening and things like that. So that was really, really good. And the event in itself was an absolute success, as the first one that we'd done. To have that many people in a room listening to, the speakers that we'd found was really great. And the testimonials from the event was also really great. We had loads of really, really positive feedback on the event, saying that there hadn't been anything like that before, and how interesting it was, and how great it was to kind of have that space. So that was great. I think post event is what kind of again, we was too ambitious basically, and I thought, this is we just come out of COVID, so it was still very, are people going to attend an in-person event, are they not going to attend, and things like that. So I decided to live stream the event, which is something that sounds ridiculous now, because I'd never live streamed anything ever, never live streamed an event. I was also running the event, and I was doing the videography and the photography, and I wanted to get really good content for post event. But so I was like, that's fine. I'm very much a yes person, so I'm like, yeah, we can do this, we can do that, which is something that I'm learning as well, not to do so much of, because I think often us marketeers can be like, yeah, no problem, like I'll get that done, and actually you're really like underselling yourself. People have whole teams to do these kind of things. So essentially the quality of the content that I got, because I was trying to live stream the event as well, was just not really that great. And actually it would have been more valuable for me to have brilliant content that I could market post event than it would have been for me to live stream it. So yeah, that was kind of the downfall of the event, that actually then led into the post event not being so successful, basically.
No, fair enough. And I think with events, it's so like visceral, and your reputation really can be quite on the line, can't it, with it going well? So it's getting those getting the things that you can do perfected, like the touch points. So for example, when I was in the recruitment network, we used to run like the huddle events, and our sort of ops team were really hot on making sure that sort of customer experience, the event experience, was just top of its game, and that really shone through. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one would be, could you give us some examples of the touch points that you implemented? And then the second one, do you think you would recommend outsourcing to like a videography team or a photographer if you was running an event, and whether it would be worth it?
Yeah, so the first question on the touch points, the kind of touch points would just be kind of emails, and it would be, just a little reminder of the takeaways, a little reminder of a little bit more information about each speaker. So it was a kind of an email journey. So, you could spotlight a speaker and give a little bit more about them. And then also, yeah, like I say, just key takeaways that they can expect from the event. And then more basic things like just the location, how to get there, stuff like that. And also having a kind of calendar invite, a diary invite, I would say is really important. So having that for people to add to their calendar as well. In the past as well, I don't know if it was with this event, but I've also done kind of like little videos from the speakers. Sometimes that's quite nice if you can send people a little video of the speaker, just sort of saying like what they're going to be talking about, how excited they are to deliver the talk, and stuff like that. And also getting people to kind of think about, if you're having a kind of panel discussion format, reminding people to kind of think about what questions they can ask and stuff like that, and just reminding people that it is going to be interactive. So yeah, just kind of little emails like that are always good. And then on the videography thing, I would say absolutely yes, especially if you're planning on being involved in the event. Events in themselves, there's often kind of things that will happen on the day that you might not have planned for. You kind of have to be ready for the unexpected. And so I think having someone solely focused on creating that really important post-event content, I would say absolutely. The only thing is that sometimes, I don't know if this is we had a videographer film one of our following events, and yeah, the content was like just not great. So yeah, again, that's maybe a bit of like a try, like you need to maybe try test the videographer. If you don't kind of, if you haven't used a videographer before, I wouldn't put all your hopes onto like one event that you've been planning for quite a long time, because that could be really heartbreaking. If it's not your fault that you didn't get the content, but it's someone else's. So yeah, kind of maybe testing a lot more before.
Yeah, love it. It's like that, managing expectations. We videographed, if that's even a word, an event for a client who sort of leveraged their podcast into an actual live event with some of their best speakers. And we got all the content, and we made clips and sort of like further stuff. But then we also turned like the speaker slots into individual podcast episodes as well. That worked quite well. And then got
Cool.
And then kind of got loads of B footage of the event and did like a mashup sort of video, and that worked quite well. And I know, like from my experience in the recruitment network, they sort of kind of did these kind of like FOMO kind of videos after, or what you missed out on kind of thing. So one thing I was going to say, I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but one of your events I saw that you did quite a cool little branding campaign with. It was like the straight out of Compton sort of branding to it, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to explain why you sort of went with that, and sort of like the power of giving it a kind of a fun little sort of branding, and what went along with that?
Yeah, so that event was on our Camino Partners brand. So that's not the Camino Search brand, but our Camino Partners brand. And that event was with Jordan. And so again, consultant kind of taking ownership, it was really Jordan's event. But I think in terms of the branding, me and Jordan spoke about it. And I think it's just like, it was kind of, compliance can be quite boring, so we just it's like, why not make it more fun?
And you know what, it works because it's stuck in my head. That was a few months ago now, and I still remember it. So yeah,
so good. But no, that event was like amazing. It was a really good event. Great speakers, great attendance there, and it was like a really intimate space, and that worked really, really well. It was a great event.
Yeah, perfect. So let's move on to the post event. So one of the things that we always think with post events, and we've touched on it slightly, is just getting the content out of it. And I think that's great. I'm sure you can stretch a lot of the speaker content and create social content for time away. But are there any other things that we should be thinking about when finishing up an event in terms of essentially contacting the guests or getting the opportunities or call to actions?
Yeah. So I think again, like maintaining touch points, it's always, I think, always definitely important to send a post-event survey. How did they like the event? How do they feel about the event? And I think with in-person events as well, the aim is always, those attend. I mean, I don't know how other people's events worked, but we would always have the consultants at the events. So the aim is for them to build, really strong relationships, like personal relationships from meeting someone in person. So I think from that, that kind of, there's, they're already going to be a warmer lead, basically, if consultants spoken to them in person in a setting that's an event, that's something that's adding value to them. So I think that's great. And then, just keeping them kind of, sending that email marketing regularly, and maintaining touch points in that way. So for us, we'll do email marketing, which is like kind of a piece of content or anything that's been going on recently. And then also kind of our like live jobs and stuff like that. And I think that works well.
Yeah, perfect. So I think this kind of like moves on to, unless you feel like we've kind of missed anything, and anything else you want to say about sort of running and hosting events?
I don't think so.
No, I
No,
think
I think we've covered it all. Yeah.
So my next sort of move on will be the community, because this all works as part of a community building strategy that you've been employing. So let's start off with the first question, because I always like to sort of talk about this when we talk to community experts. Is how do you define a community in recruitment? Because it's very different for different sectors. But kind of what is it you've been trying to build?
Yeah. So I think first of all, like, community is, it kind of is a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? And I think that recruitment has always kind of lent itself really well to a community, because recruiters have always been about building their network. And I think, like, I don't know about you, but if I think about the word network, I think community is a nicer way of saying network, basically. If I think about the word network, I kind of imagine one person like on a podium, like handing out their business cards to people around them. But if I think about the word community, I just think of a group of people. So I think it's about, you can start talking about community when, one, your strategy really aligns with the people in your network. So, you kind of align with their pain points, with their wants, with their needs. And then two, you're kind of positioning yourself as more of a partner or a peer. You're not necessarily kind of selling to them. So I think, like you say, it does work. It is really different for different kind of recruitment businesses. But I think for us, building a community has been about adding value outside of the recruitment service that we offer. And for us, that's been in ways of content and knowledge sharing and events.
Yeah, perfect. And I see that you sort of mentioned the community strategy. So did you have one that was kind of mapped out for each sort of mini strategy, that mini community that you build?
I think yes. We kind of had a different content strategy, and again, I think working with the consultants, to kind of working with the consultants is really helpful when building that community. And that was kind of one of the first things that I did when I joined Camino Partners and Camino Search. Because if you think about kind of Camino Partners, there's 3 brands. There's Camino Partners, Camino Search, and Cabana Search, and they each have their own company page. But then within that, so even if you look at sort of Camino Partners, within Camino Partners already, in terms terms of candidates, there's marketing, operations, finance, compliance. So yes, of course, the company page can post content for each of those kind of categories, but the tone of voice is going to be the same. And so I think, if you can get the kind of consultants to really be, honing in on their specific desk, on their specific niche, then it's going to be a lot more authentic when it comes to community building and stuff like that. And that's something that kind of like Matt with marketing has done really, really well, that Jordan with compliance has done really, really well. And I think we started to do that with Camino Search as well. So when I started, I literally made it my number one priority to kind of work with the consultants and build their personal brand and, give them personal branding training. And I think that's what's kind of helped to grow the community aspect of things.
Yeah, I think that's a really key distinction that you've made there in terms of, champion a consultant, because really you're gonna need a figurehead, aren't you, really, to be able to run that community. It's going to be, the directors could own one of the communities, but a lot of the times the senior leadership team will go to the marketing person and say, look, our goal is to build a community. And then a lot of the time, probably the marketing person will go lock themselves away in a room and write a strategy and talk about events and building Slack channels and things like that. And then there's no one to really run it. So I think the way that you went about it was perfect, really, to actually have someone to join you, because they'll know that market inside out. They'll know the right people to bring onto it, and then they'll be able to act as kind of like I said, the figurehead to drive that forward. So absolutely. What other techniques have you employed to successfully nurture and grow a community?
So I think it's really just about kind of finding out pain points. And again, this is really going to need to talk to the consultants a lot about this. You're going to, that's been one of the things that I've had to do a lot over the past, year or so, is speaking to each individual consultant regularly, because there are so many kind of different niches and things like that. And I want to really find out what their clients and what their candidates are talking about. And so, and the consultants are the ones on the phone, so I can speak to them and get a much better understanding of what people's pain points are than any other way. So find out pain points and then kind of adding value in terms of content. I think something that's like not done enough, but that could be done really well, is just really short articles on, either frequently asked questions or something that candidates and clients aren't sure about. So kind of, sharing content, hosting events. And then I think it's just about consistency. So just really consistently adding that value. And then also just kind of giving it time as well. Building a community really does take some time. It's not going to happen overnight.
So when I think of communities, and one of the things that always pops to my head is kind of like a communication channel, whether it's like WhatsApp or Slack or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that something that you experimented with and implemented for these communities?
Yeah, so we do have a LinkedIn group and a WhatsApp chat for our operations, kind of operations within recruitment. We don't actually have that on the Camino Search brand at all. So it's not something that we've actually experimented with at the moment. But we do have like the meetup page, and I think just kind of maintaining touch points through email marketing has worked really well, but we haven't actually done that yet. And that's, again, I think that's been like a thing of, like you say, who's going to facilitate that? Because I think that's what you don't want to do. You don't want to create something that's then kind of there's not that facilitation, and there's not really anyone there to kind of fully look after it.
No, I agree. And yeah, when you start to get into that territory, you really kind of need a community manager, don't you, really, to take control of that. And they can get a bit overwhelming. Sometimes I've joined WhatsApp sort of groups, and they're like a couple of weeks in, I'm like, right, I'm getting bombarded by messages from a bunch of weirdos. I'm just gonna mute this, and then you never go on it again. So it's finding that fine balance, isn't it? Um,
Yeah,
one of the
definitely.
things that I'm kind of thinking is like, how do you actually sway a consultant to sort of help you sort of champion this? Did you ever any pushback like, oh, I haven't got time for this? Because obviously it's adding another sort of time commitment to them, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think with that, it's a case of just like almost show and don't tell. So, if you can show consultants the kind of value and what that they can get from events, or they can get from doing any marketing activity really, then they're going to want to do it themselves. They're going to be more inclined to doing it themselves. So I think once we'd kind of done the first event, they could really see, how many people we got into one room together. They, really did build like real relationships. And then if you say that you can do that specifically for your desk, and we can help you to do that, and this is the format and this is how we're going to do it, then they're going to be much more inclined to kind of doing it once they see the value. So I think showing the value of doing it, championing the people that kind of do it, is kind of how you're going to get the consultants to buy in.
Yeah, great. Love that. Um, so sort of final question on the community building, before we move on to another topic that I think is really, really quite interesting. What do you think were some of your biggest lessons, takeaways, tips, anything kind of like that when it comes to someone wants to start building a community now?
Yeah. So I think first of all, just kind of be aware of like where you're at, and kind of be aware of kind of, anything that's kind of like a strategy that's kind of like a to-do list. Like you kind of need to be aware of whether you're what stage you're at as a business. Are you in that establishment stage, and or are you kind of a bit more established? And I think key takeaways would be kind of, again, just it needs to be a team effort, really, I think, with community building. So really getting buy-in from the consultants, really getting them to speak to their network and stuff like that. And then that way it's just a bit more of a kind of it's a bit more of a holistic team effort. um and yeah, I think that's how you'll kind of truly build a community where people align with your brand, if they align with the individuals.
Yeah, perfect. Love it. Thank you, Elle. So one thing that you mentioned in our sort of email chain, like right before the sort of podcast episode, that you wanted to touch on a little bit, I thought it was so poignant for some of the people that are listening. And it's that about, evolving from a generalist marketer into someone who's kind of finding their more specialist skills. I went through this myself. I was a generalist marketer, and then I landed in sort of really enjoying sort of branding and web development, and sort of pursued that for a little bit after. Tell us a little bit about your sort of story and what's been happening with you then in terms of this.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely wouldn't say that I have evolved into a specialist or anything like that. But I think being a generalist marketer has been great for me. I mean, I never did marketing at university. I started to Signify my first marketing role. And yeah, I've literally done kind of like a little bit of everything, which has been really, really nice. But I think I'm just kind of starting to figure out kind of what I really, really like and what I don't so much. And a great kind of, a great tool for me anyway has been my personal LinkedIn. I've kind of used that more over the past, I don't know, maybe 6 months. And I've kind of experimented on there with kind of copywriting and stuff like that. So yeah, basically I've just kind of been figuring out what I kind of really enjoy and what I don't, because as a generalist marketer, you do kind of do a little bit of everything. And I think I found that actually I really enjoy kind of writing copy. And I've been doing more of that as well, like at Camino. So, you know, more writing copy for like, I think once you realize you enjoy something, I've been putting more of a kind of a bit more of attention onto it as well. You know, like if I'm writing copy for a collateral or anything like that. So yeah, I've just been kind of figuring it out.
No, I think that's really because, you know, I'd agree with this. For me, I think marketing is just such a huge spectrum. So if you end up taking on just one element of that spectrum and doing really well at it, you're going to get yourself noticed by that market. You could be like really amazing at ads or marketing, email marketing or podcasting. And if you just really went into that, that can then be like such a benefit to the business rather than just trying to do everything, but you're not really enjoying most of it. And
yeah.
and it's great to see that you've kind of used LinkedIn and that sort of personal branding sort of journey to sort of experiment with things that interest you. Because, and you know, that's the way that I kind of got in touch with you. I saw your sort of posts on LinkedIn and thought, yes, definitely want to get Elle on. She's passionate about what she talks about. So a lot of the time you'll find with the sort of the marketers in businesses, you know, they're so on giving the founder a brand and the business a brand on social media, and then they neglect to do their own personal branding. Would you recommend that that's something, you know, shows that probably it does work and it allows you to find what your passions are? But is, you know, is this something that you would say that definitely try?
Yeah, I mean, I think because for me as well, I really didn't post on LinkedIn for, you know, for a couple of years really. But for me, I think because I do enjoy writing, I think for me it's very much a creative outlet, and I don't know, I just enjoy it. So I think if anything, you know, I know that actually, you know, everyone says, you know, personal branding, writing on LinkedIn, it kind of is, it takes time, and often you're busy, you don't have time. But if you kind of, I think if you let go of the like perfectionism of like, oh my God, so many people are going to see this and this is really scary, and you almost just, it's for me anyway now, it's just like literally whatever I'm thinking, and you know, I'll just write it on the train sort of thing. Then I think it can actually be quite enjoyable, and it can help you to kind of find out what you enjoy. So, you know, if you're a marketeer and you're a generalist marketeer and you're thinking, do you know what, I really enjoy kind of videography, why not, you know, do some little posts on your own personal account to kind of explore that more and make it, I think if something's a hobby, it's more fun as well than if it's a job. So you can, I think you can, you know, really explore stuff like that on your personal LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I wrote a post about this the other day actually, and it's kind of once you get over that imposter syndrome and fear of posting and kind of figure out what you're passionate about, I don't know if you saw it, but it's kind of like you actually see like a mindset shift, don't you, over time, and then little ideas just pop into your head, and you're like, oh, I'll write that down for later. Actually, that'll make a good LinkedIn post. But it happens over time, and especially I find if I fall off the wagon, for example, for LinkedIn and don't post for a week, then it all dries up the ideas. And then I have to slowly kind of get back into it for the ideas to pop into my head again.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. When I'm posting, I'm like constantly thinking of another idea to post on LinkedIn. But it's like you say, when you haven't done it for a while, you're like, oh, what? I don't have anything to talk about. And to be fair, that's part of the kind of things that we need to do as marketers, is to get, you know, consultants posting on LinkedIn as well. I'm always telling people to kind of write it in their notes if they get an idea. But I know that actually, if you're not posting on LinkedIn, that's probably you're not probably going to get an idea come into your head to post in your notes. So it is a bit of it's a slow process, like you say.
Yeah, but yeah, once you get there and you start building it, there are the benefits are great, aren't they? Just from like you've said, not even just from a commercial perspective, but like kind of a self-discovery, really, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And even for the consultants as well, I've seen, you know, so many. Nathan, for example, he started doing Plax chats, which is like a video series, and like he said, it's given him, he's learned so much. So he's got great inbound leads from it, and it's been really commercial, but also he's kind of learned from it as well, and it's made him more of an expert in his field and on his desk. So yeah, it's a double-sided kind of win, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So last few questions, Elle.
Cool.
What do you think the future holds in the recruitment industry?
I mean, I feel like this is going to kind of summarize everything I've spoken about. And I mean, the future, it's not really the future. Obviously, personal branding is already here. It's probably all anyone's spoken about for the past 2 years, maybe. But I think marketers becoming enablers of consultants' brands is going to be the way forward. I think we already know that, company pages don't get company recruitment pages, just don't really get as much traction as personal pages get. Don't get as much engagement. People want to kind of see people, and I think there's been a massive shift away from there has been a massive shift, yeah, in terms of people seeing traditional marketing and kind of resisting it. So I think definitely enabling the consultants to market to their desk and to their niche, and kind of assisting with that. I think that's going to, be even more so in the future, and almost like kind of consultants becoming kind of influencers, and like having that kind of raw footage, like that raw marketing feel, and even moving away from LinkedIn, but TikTok, Instagram, having those as kind of professional spaces as well. I think that's going to be where the future's going to lie, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, awesome. I love asking this question because I get so many varied answers, and there's a lot in the future, and I think a lot of the theme is just like just really honing in on some of these things that people are starting to get wise to. But yeah, and it's just being more authentic, giving value, and aspects like this. Last round of questions, my quick fire questions. I see that you probably saw a couple of these.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite pizza topping?
Easily mushrooms.
Oh,
is that a bad answer?
Well, no answer's a bad answer. I just hate mushrooms.
Yeah, to be fair, love them. You do kind of love or hate mushrooms, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. What's your best productivity method? How do you stay productive?
So I was thinking about this for a while, and I actually use the Grace Beverly method. So I don't know if you've heard about it, but Grace Beverly, she has just launched her planners. So she started selling these planners with this method in there. But I was actually copying this from her Instagram stories before she ever sold the planners. And it's basically just having a list of quick tips, a list of tasks, and a list of projects. And then I use that to kind of, I'm very like visual, so I use that to kind of separate everything out. And I will have like 3 tasks that I have to get done for the day, and they'll be like half-an-hour tasks. And then the projects are longer things, so I'll block time to do some of the project, but I'll know that it's not going to get done that day. And then the quick tips are like exactly that quick. So like if you're really struggling for motivation or whatever, do a quick tick, and then your brain gets that like little bit of like, is it serotonin, where you're like, yes, I've done it.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm gonna look her up. Is she like a productivity sort of guru on Instagram?
No, she's actually not. Grace Beverly is she's sports industry. So she's got like a fitness app, and she's got fitness wear, but she's also just branched into the planners.
Oh, nice.
And I love it. So
yeah, I really like that. Okay, yeah, no, I'm gonna look up that. What's your favorite podcast?
My favorite, okay, so I always go back to Stephen Bartlett's podcast just because I think he has great guests and they're always really, really interesting. But I think I mentioned it to you before when we was talking about me coming on here, and it's How to Fail. So I just really love the concept of it being about, how you've learned from failures, and stuff like that. Because I do think you take your learnings from, things that don't work so well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just what you learn from your failures. There's nothing wrong with failing. Fail fast. Um, what company do you think does marketing the best?
Okay, this is hard, but I've always been a fan of the Innocence movies marketing. I just
Oh, yeah.
think that it's really fun, and they always just have great copy, and yeah, it's great.
The Twitter for those guys is just unreal, isn't it? It's
It is.
on another level. Yeah, whoever they're paying, they're not paying them enough. They're probably paying them quite a bit. And if you could live anywhere else, where would it be? I think this is quite a good question for you now, because you're just about to go traveling. You told me, aren't you?
Yes, so I am. Yes, I am just about to go traveling. Um, so I mean, my answer though is not is not anywhere that I'm going to. So I don't know if that. I'm just about to go traveling to Southeast Asia and to Australia for a bit. But when I thought about where I'd actually like to live, it was more probably a European city. So long term, I would probably say maybe Barcelona or Amsterdam or somewhere like that.
Yeah, nice. We've had yeah, we've had that come up. Holland come up quite a few times actually. I think it's such a great place, isn't it?
It's
Yeah,
just a
really
nice
nice.
vibe.
Yeah, lovely vibe, isn't it? Yeah, and Barcelona's great as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also nice vibe, and it's got the sun. So
yeah. You got best of both worlds, haven't you?
exactly.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elle. I think we got loads out of that. Really good tips. Again, like you said, sort of sharing your failures so others can sort of not make the same mistakes,
Exactly. That's the
level up.
aim.
Yeah, no, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and really I hope you have a lovely time traveling. Are you going to
Thank
be doing
you.
some like freelance copywriting work? Because you're saying that's a bit of a passion.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I literally have no idea. I have no idea what the future holds. I've got a one way flight. So maybe. I mean, hopefully I'll do some LinkedIn posts. So I'll have some great views to share.
Oh yeah, you'll get loads of likes from that, won't you? Perfect. Thank you so much, Elle.
Thank you. Thanks, Hayden.